New York City's The Dead Rabbit is world famous for its Irish coffee. And this episode, you'll hear Sean Muldoon recount the messy incident that put them on the path to perfecting this somewhat neglected cocktail. Also with us this episode is the Dead Rabbit beverage director, Jillian Vose, who explains how the sous vide cooking technique enables the team to serve the Irish coffee perfectly and consistently every time. Sean, Jack and Jillian have now published the definitive story of the Irish coffee in a new book titled When Whiskey Met Its Match, which sets the record straight once and for all that the cocktail was invented by a Northern Irishman, Joe Sheridan. Sean and Jillian, thanks so much for joining us on the Drinks Adventures podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
I was really excited to learn about the new book. Now, you guys have published a few books before. Tell me about the latest edition, When Whiskey Met Its Match.
We actually have two books coming out. One is the book you're talking about, and one is another book called Paddy Drinks, which is about Irish whiskey cocktails. It's coming out in like 4 weeks. So we wanted to do both of these together. One is the story of the Irish coffee. It's a special drink in our bar. We take the drink very seriously. And also because it was created by a fellow Northern Irishman, a guy from Castledown in County Tyrone, Joe Sheridan. So we wanted to tell his story because when we read anything, when St. Patrick's Day comes out or when National Irish Coffee Day comes out, there's always press about the Irish coffee. You see it in every magazine up and down the country. But I know when the story is going to start and where it's going to end because it's always the same story. And I knew there had to be more to it than that. So I wanted to get to the real nitty-gritty of who he was and the story of the Irish coffee because it hasn't been told before and it is a really interesting story. So there was two reasons. It was one is because it's our drink and it's a drink that we're known for and we take seriously, and the other is because it was a fellow Northern Irishman that created the drink. We've been wanting to do this book for 3 years, and it's only now we've literally got around to doing it. But it's been in the pipeline for 3 years. We've been thinking about it and working on it for three solid years, and it's a self-funded project. Everything I designed it myself, for example, the whole layout. We raised the money ourselves. And we plotted it and planned it and put it together ourselves. So it's a labour of love.
Maybe you could go back and just tell me, what are the origins of the Irish coffee?
Well, Joe Sheridan came from, as I say, Northern Ireland back in early 1900s. He moved to Dublin after his father died in 1926, I believe he dies. They go down there, the whole family settles down in Dublin. And but even as a kid, his father was a farmer, a cattle farmer. So they used to go to the periphery of Dublin and to the cattle markets with his father. And he can remember, like, he's been recorded as telling his roommate and stuff that the farmers were drinking coffee laced with whiskey when he was a kid. That's where it sort of starts. But then he goes to work in Dublin. And when he's down there, he works in a place called the Dolphin Hotel. And it's true that they did have a stock of whiskey and they wanted to get rid of it. So they were doing anything in the world they could to get rid of it. And they put it in coffee and everything like this. But it wasn't the Irish coffee. It was literally coffee with whiskey. Joe Sheridan, he did come across that drink in that bar, but it wasn't that the bar specialised in it. They didn't have any menu or anything like that. It was just like an afterthought. He didn't get the Irish coffee recipe from her. He just came across coffee and whiskey. So he goes across to Shannon then and he makes it a special drink. He adds sugar. He puts it in a stem glass and he adds cream. The real story of the Irish coffee is it definitely was an invention of Shannon Airport. But as I say, in Ireland, there's this whole debate at the minute. Did he take the idea from Dublin? I don't believe for 1 second that he took the idea from Dublin. I just believe there was a drink in Dublin in a bar that he worked in that did do whiskey and coffee.
What year are we talking that the first Irish coffee was made in Shannon?
1940s, Jillian, is that what we're talking about? 1946?
Yeah, I'd say like mid-40s.
And then it becomes famous when the travel writer, Stanton Delaplane, he was a writer for the San Francisco Chronicle. I believe him and a bunch of people were actually over in visiting the Pope, of all things, the Pope at the time. It was a delegation and all these travel writers were over meeting the Pope in Rome. And on the way back, they stopped at Shannon Airport. This is an airport where planes had to refuel back in those days, and they would have refueled in Shannon. It was the last port of call before America. So they were all sitting in the airport, plane was refueling, and they came across this drink. And it was like Joe Sheridan had already left the bar many, many years before. But Stanton Delaplane seen the drink, and he goes to Buena Vista in San Francisco. which is where he hung out. It was his favorite watering hole. As I say, he was based in San Francisco. And he tells the owners of the place then about this drink that he came across in Shannon Airport. And he says that they should have it in the menu. And a couple of years later, I believe it was 1952, they first put it in their menu and it becomes a big success.
The Buena Vista Cafe in San Francisco, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it wasn't the first place to serve Irish coffee in America. There were other bars that served it before Buena Vista, but it was the place definitely that made it famous. Definitely.
And they still serve it there to this day. It's kind of a pretty sort of iconic thing to do, isn't it? To go to the cafe and have one of those Irish coffees.
That's all they really serve there. All the other bottles are like totally clean because they only are pouring the Tullamore Dew and the coffee. So it's pretty amazing to watch.
2,000 a day is what they purportedly sell every day. Pre-COVID. Definitely not at the minute, but pre-COVID, 2,000 a day.
The Dead Rabbit didn't even have an Irish coffee on its menu when it first opened in 2013. That came a bit later on.
There was a girl in the bar one day and she, I remember it very, very clearly. She was knocking out cocktails and she was asked for 9 Irish coffees. Like a group of tourists came in, they wanted 9 Irish coffees. And it really, I happened to be walking into the bar at the time. She said, "Sean, can you do me a favour? Can you make me 9 Irish coffees?" It was me, she said it to. And I'm not joking. That 9 Irish coffees, me making them in the bar at that time was like open heart surgery. It was just...
I can picture the whole thing.
It was probably floated all over the walls. I don't know what. It was just a mess. Probably took a guys 25 minutes to get them. And I said to Jack afterwards, we can't ever be in this situation again. I said, we need to prepare that if 200 people walk through those doors, that we're ready to serve 200 people Irish coffees. I said, we've just got to come up with a way of doing it. It can't ever happen again.
So I worked in quite a few bars over the course of my career. And it was anytime that we ever put a hot drink on the menu is a complete disaster. Like Sean was saying, it's, you need something to heat it. It gets cold very fast. It is kind of a nightmare. Or for the sake of coffee, most people don't have coffee ready to go that's piping hot. So I thought it was really brilliant of Jack to think about the sous vide. We put them in these like very safe food service grade plastic bottles that can withstand the heat of the sous vide, and we keep it at 80 degrees Celsius, 176 Fahrenheit. And that is a hot water bath in which you can, it's mostly Irish coffee, and then we might have, say, our Irish whiskey, hot punch like a toddy. We have a hot chocolate and a seasonal drink sometimes. But it's just very consistent because we'll do everything in batches. And we go through it so fast, no matter what, we're using everything up in a matter of a few days. So the sous vide is, I think, the best way. It doesn't burn the coffee, and it keeps it piping hot. And we do the Demerara sugar syrup. We pre-mix that into the coffee because a big mistake some people make, especially with the sugar cube on the bottom or syrup, is that it sits at the bottom there or it doesn't properly dissolve. So this is just a very consistent every sip. And then we do another very clever thing that Sean's wife, Anne, came up with was using a protein shaker to whip the cream. So we pre-whip everything and we'll have backups for each bar station and you can fill them up as you need throughout the night. But it stays pretty consistent throughout the night until you need it. And just top it up and then just wipe the lip and then put it back in the fridge until you need it again. So those are 2 very clever ways to do Irish coffees efficiently.
And you guys use Tullamore Dew as well, is that right?
We use Bushmills Original blended Irish whiskey. We've gone through many iterations of the drink over time, and Bushmills Original has been the most successful. I think that's the longest standing recipe we've had and intend to keep. It's just something that's light, dried fruit, doesn't get lost in the coffee mix, but it's not necessarily like powering through the coffee either. So we do recommend, like a pot still, for instance, is like a little too abrasive. It doesn't make as good of one as a blend.
And other than that, when you kind of conceived the cocktail, what are the other kind of differences in the way that it's crafted versus the other Irish coffees that people might have tried previously?
Year 2000, I believe, I was in London at the Islington Bar Show. And Dale DeGroff was doing a presentation, and he did a presentation on the Irish coffee. And the question he asked the audience was, how many of you people have had an Irish coffee? And everybody put up their hand. And he said, the second part of the question is, how many of you people have had an Irish coffee that you actually liked? And nobody put up their hands, including me. And then he told you why that was. And he said that it was an afterthought. People didn't take it seriously. It needed to be treated like a cocktail. Everything was about balance. It was about proportions. And he talked about people using aerosol whippy can type stuff for cream. He talked about coffee being stewed served in a hot plate where it had the ass burnt off it all day long. He talked about the sugar not being right. He talked about the whiskey being too strong. And then he talked about oversized glasses where all you could taste was coffee. And he talked about the importance of a 6-ounce stem glass. And he also said about the coffee should be 2 parts to 1 part whiskey. Things like that you would never have thought before. A lot of Irish coffees are served in latte glasses, especially in Ireland. And a latte glass, you know how much coffee is going into it. It's like at least 5 parts coffee to 1 part whiskey. As Jillian said, nobody likes making hot drinks. So when you're not enjoying making it in the first place, you're throwing it together. You're not touring. You're not paying attention. But Dale made the first Irish coffee that I'd ever actually liked, and it was incredible. So our Irish coffee is based on what he did. If you ever get Dale DeGroff to Australia and you ever want him to make a really, really good drink, don't get him to make a Cosmo or anything. Get him to make his Irish coffee, because he's really, really well known for that one drink, the Irish coffee.
When the Dead Rabbit is in full flight in non-pandemic times, how many Irish coffees would you typically be serving a day there? Can you compete with the Buena Vista?
No, we can't compete with Buena Vista, the amount that we do, but we can definitely compete with them on quality. There's no, like, an Irish coffee and the Buena Vista and Irish coffee and the Dead Rabbit's 2 different things. And listen, you might go there and you might see the guys doing what they do as Jillian's talking. They line them all up and it looks magical and it's very theatrical if you've never seen it before. But the actual Irish coffee that you get in the glass versus our Irish coffee is 2 different things. And there's absolutely no way they can compete with us. And I don't care if this goes straight back to their door when I'm standing here. They'll never be able to compete with us on taste. Ours is definitely a better Irish coffee, but they're famous for it. And I'm not going to take away what they've done for the Irish coffee. They've made it famous, all that, and respect to them. Serving 2,000 a day to this day. I've nothing but respect, but their drink is nowhere near as good as ours. That's just the bottom. That's just the truth, you know?
Yeah, they don't have the systems in place to be able to do that. You know, it's just very old school. Line up, say, 15 glasses, sugar cube, pot of coffee, and then cream, and, a big dose of Irish whiskey in there too. So it is, I agree with Sean.
And tell me about how you came over to Australia, Jillian, and introduced the Duke of Clarence to the Dead Rabbit's Irish coffee, because I'm a regular there when it's the norm to go out. Right now, and people aren't going out much in Sydney for obvious reasons. But I always really enjoy an Irish coffee at the Duke of Clarence.
Well, that's very good to hear that they're keeping it up. It's been a few years since I was over there. I'd say, is it 3 summers ago?
I noticed the sous vide on the bar now that you mention it as well.
Yeah, I don't know if they had like a home exactly for it when I was there, but I'm glad that they made space on the back bar. But yeah, Mikey Enright is a good friend of Jack and Sean, and he asked for us to come over to share. They had just opened, I believe, the Duke of Clarence. It's right behind the barbershop, and they wanted to kind of do Irish coffees, and they loved ours. And it was just great to partner up with Tullamore Dew. They ended up bringing me over, and we just had a few days of, we did some podcasts and some interviews, and we just did their Sunday roast in Irish coffee together. And it was a lovely time. It was only 72 hours. I would never do that ever again. I think I was on an airplane longer than I was actually in Sydney, it felt like.
Now, the book's out pretty soon, guys. Where can people get hold of the book?
It is a self-published version. We're hoping that it does so well that a publisher will come along and want to do a reprint. But in the interim, it will be available online through our website and through, I believe, Amazon or one of these sorts of places. There will be 4,000 copies in existence, but we're going to give a lot away. So we hope if we sell 2,000, we'll give 2,000 away. That's the way we're going to do it. Because all we want to do is get the truth about the Irish coffee out. That's all we're trying to do for us, you know.
And then the other book, Patty Drinks, which is a guide to modern Irish whiskey cocktails. That one comes out on the 22nd of February of this year, 2022.
And these are classic cocktails or your own signature drinks, a combination of the two?
Mostly it's 90 drinks. I think 83 of them are original Dead Rabbit drinks. And then there are some classics in there. We've adapted them to be our house specs, but they are, Tipperary, Emeralds, things like that. So, it's just it talks about obviously our story of a bit of how we all kind of got started and how the name came, Patty Drinks. And then it just by different styles of Irish whiskey, the drinks are broken down. And there's a good explanation on how to use each style of whiskey. So by the end of it, you'll have a guide to the flavor profiles based on casks. And then you'll also hopefully be inspired to make your own drinks with the flavor profiles and styles of drinks that we've